Chip, to millions of people across the world, you are one of the greatest car designers to ever exist.
I'm excited.
Star of Overhaulin and owner of Foose Design, how would you describe yourself?
I started my own business to build the most beautiful pieces of rolling art that I can build. That's what we want, build those. I would work for 40 hours straight and then I'd sleep for 8. I had lost 27 pounds building that car. At Art Center, if you were drawing hot rods or muscle cars, it was frowned upon. I was crying because he wanted to put these lines on it due to some bad business decisions. The hot rod shop went bankrupt.
Chip, thank you for coming and sitting in the back
pleasure.
of my van.
Thank you, Ben.
No problem at all. I bet you were fairly surprised when I said, would you mind coming and getting in the back of my van as the first thing that a random individual goes and says
Not
to
the first time
somebody.
I've been in the back of the van.
But to millions of people across the world, you are one of the greatest car designers to ever exist.
Well, thank you.
Star of Overhaulin to many, and owner of Foose Design, and so much more. But in your own words, how would you describe yourself? Who are you and what
I'm an
do you
extension of my father's career.
do? Okay.
That's the way I would put it. My father was my hero, my best friend. Unfortunately, we lost him in 2018, but I grew up with my father, and my first memories are when he was the shop foreman for Gene Winfield, who's quite a well-known customizer. He had a shop called AMT, which I don't know if you ever built plastic model kits as a kid.
We had like Hot Wheels and Lego here is
Okay.
kind of the big thing.
Well, there were plastic model kits when you bought it, and it was just a piece of white plastic, and you painted your body and you assembled and built this little model. AMT built the models, but where my dad worked with Gene, they were building the full-size cars that became the model.
Right.
So as a kid, I grew up in this shop watching them build these cars. They would become models. My dad would bring the models home, and then as a kid, I was building the same cars that I watched he and the crew build.
And that's important because that's like your earliest years. That to me was what I was going to ask, which is those memories of basically what formed who you are today.
Well, also Hot Wheels, Mattel's, they were building die-cast of the cars that they were building. So as a kid, I was building little models of the cars my dad built, and I had Hot Wheels in my pocket of the cars that they built. And I'm still, in this day, living my childhood because I'm running Foose Design, but I'm working with Revell. They're building plastic model kits of the car that we build. And I've got Full Throttle building, Hot Wheels, basically, or die-cast. And Hot Wheels also built die-cast of the cars that I build. So I'm just a kid still.
And if you add some context to that, I'm just a kid still, what kind of age was that? 'Cause when people talk about their past and their childhood growing up, that could actually span like a 10-year period. Do you remember being like 4 or 5 years old and getting into
I remember
all of
3
that?
years old in Gene's shop, and my dad bringing those things home. So I'm still 3.
So your earliest memory was die-cast models and cars, but was there
No, my earliest
particulars-
memories are watching my father and the crew build these cars in the shop.
And is there a particular one that stands out?
When I was a kid, well, it was interesting because they were also building all of the props that were used on Star Trek. And so the little shuttle, I remember watching them build the shuttle, but there was also Get Smart, the little Sunbeam Tiger. I rode around that Sunbeam Tiger as a kid, and it had the little radar that was on the antenna. It had a cannon that came out of the hood. The license plate had a slot machine with all different numbers, and one cherry was still in there. And my dad would just pull the lever, and I'd watch the license plate, and it'd come up a different number. Just fun stuff. And then Bewitched was another television show in America, and there was a car called the Reactor, and that was used on Bewitched. And also Man from U.N.C.L.E. I'm trying to remember what the name of that car, but anyway, he was building all these cars that were on television with Gene. It was fun. But then when I was 7 is when my dad left, and he started his own shop, and I started working with him. And at the same time, my father was working with another designer who had retired from Ford Motor Company. It was Alex Tremulous. He was the head or chief of the Thunderbird studio through the 60s. When he retired, he lived near my dad's shop, and he would show up all the time just because he was interested in what my father was doing. And before he was at Thunderbird, he designed the Tucker, and he also worked for Auburn Cord Duesenberg. So I would look at his drawings, and he showed me some tricks in drawing, and he also wrote my letter of recommendation to Art Center. And so I'm still living my childhood. You know, everything that I thought was really cool as a kid, I'm trying to keep it cool.
I feel you. We have to pinch ourselves sometimes when we enter like what we love doing. And Freddie, who's also today, we're at PETROLHEADONISM live at Knebworth House in the UK recording this.
It's great to meet him here.
There's literally a fantastic huge car event going on outside the doors of this van, and it's been amazing to see your audience come up to you here and recognise you for your work in design. But you mentioned for the first time their art. So as a process, you were growing up surrounded by cars, surrounded by your father building cars. Did you naturally just love the design and art side of it? Was you how early was you when you started looking at things and picturing them differently?
Well, I started doing that as a kid because what my father and the crew at Gene's shop were doing is they were modifying. So I was watching these modifications. But the first time I remember being passionate about what was being modified was my father and I were building our family van. And he wanted to paint some lines on the van. And I liked where it was going before, and he was saying he wanted to put these lines on the van, and I was against it. And he said, no, we're going to do it. And I remember as a kid, 10 years old, I was crying because he wanted to put these lines on it. And that's when I really remember for the first time being passionate about something. And to this day, my dad and I would argue. He wanted to put it on because he didn't like it. It was a green metal flake van. This is back in the 70s. And it was a little bit blotchy. So he wanted to put these lines with a blend off of them to hide the blotchiness. But I thought it was really clean without the lines. And he put them on. He was boss.
I grew up in a family business with my dad. And I remember even things over stock control, we'd have a complete falling out or like a complete difference of opinion on something. It was only years later where suddenly I'd trigger and see where he was coming from sometimes. But even me, I still think to myself, no, I still agree with how I thought of it in that way. But then that's what makes a car personal to you, isn't it? Or personal to your father, is because you've had that personalisation and looking at it.
As a designer, I have a question for you.
Okay.
The name of your podcast?
Road to Success.
Road to Success. It needs to be on your drape right here.
It could be. So my thing back to you is A, we can overlay it on the screen in the bottom left hand corner.
Right.
So then it doesn't matter what camera angle you're looking at, it's always there. So we can use it digitally. And B, I like the guest to be the centre of attention. I like the environment that's clean.
I never want to be the center of attention.
I want the guest to be the thing that changes.
I want what I'm building to be the center of attention.
And is that right there? We spoke yesterday when we were on stage. The cars that you're building, a lot of cars over the years that you customised go into shows. I've been to SEMA myself. There's some enormous shows in the UK. It makes what we do here look very, very small most of the time.
Well, thank you.
How competitive are you, and did that come with your father? When you enter the cars, you want to win, right?
Well, definitely. That means I did my job right. So it's interesting because things are changing in the car show world in America, where I grew up, and it was based on what you did and how well you did it, and you would get more points for doing more things to a car. Now, I never thought that, more was more. I always thought less was more, but it's what you do. And what I'm talking about is if you had fenders on a car, the fenders took effort. So there's more points in a car show if you had fenders. If you have a top on a car, there's more points. And I'm talking about roadsters, like America's Most Beautiful Roadster Award, which is given out at the Grand National Roadster Show. And I've been lucky enough to be involved with 12 cars that have won that show. But things changed. It used to be based on a judging system where it wasn't opinions that decided who were the winners. It was based on what you did and how well you did it. And if you did everything to your best and you did, a top and fenders, in the time that I grew up, if there were two cars that were competing and they were both really, really nice, one didn't have fenders and one did have fenders, if they were really both equal quality cars, the one with fenders would win because it was more effort. Today, it's judges, and the judges are just there to observe the vehicle and it's a pick. It's not the car being raised up and mirrors and, space for a judge to crawl underneath the car and look at it, which is the way that the Riddler is still judged. It's still based on what you did and how well you did it. But America's Most Beautiful Roadster Award is now just a pick. And I think it's a shame because what you're getting is, let's just say they pick their top 8 cars that they'll be judging, and they may take a picture of each car, and all the judges go into the judges' room, and they put all these pictures up on the wall, and they go, okay, car number 1, who likes this car? And one person says, well, I don't like low-profile tires. Okay, so so-and-so doesn't like that car. Another car, I don't like those taillights at all. Okay. And then another car, and these could be completely hand-built cars, but one judge says, that's a really strange-looking fender.
So do you prefer that system?
No, and here's why. I'm going to tell you why. When you get all the way down to the end, and there's one car that's just a traditional, 1-800 bot car that doesn't have a D-Bird motor. It's not a show car. It's just a driver, but there's nothing on that car that any of the judges don't like, because it's a traditional, beautiful hot rod. It wins the show because everybody likes that one. There's not a ding on it anywhere. So it's opinions that are now deciding who's winning these shows. But the negative of it is the cars that are winning aren't pushing the industry forward and doing things that we haven't ever seen.
It's doing things that's been done in the past and that's traditional. Yes. And winning points.
So it's stopping the builders from doing their absolute best work because the best show cars aren't winning. And I had 2 cars that I was going to build, but when the judging system changed, both those builders decided, I'm not building a car and spending that kind of money when a traditional car wins. So I can tell you of 2 cars that would have been built and money would have been spent and it would have, helped the industry. But they both got stopped because they weren't going to spend money on something that they knew wouldn't win the show. And I can't tell a customer, I used to be very confident that I could build a car and win that show. I am not confident that I can build a car and win that show.
Because you don't know the judges.
I don't know that they're going to pick that car. And I don't have any interest in building a very, very traditional car. I would want to build something that's pushing the industry and doing things that we have never seen yet.
So translate that passion and energy all the way back for me. When you first went past your teenage years and you come out of art centre, and you'd applied everything that you learnt growing up with your father and then everything that came from art centre, how did you get into the world of TV? Were you the character that could speak to a camera straight away?
I never wanted.
What were you like back then?
I never wanted it to be about me. And what had happened is, I don't know if you're familiar with Monster Garage, Jesse James.
I've heard of Jesse James.
Jesse James had a show called Monster Garage. But before that show was ever filmed, Jesse called me because we worked together at Boyd's shop.
Yeah.
He wanted me to.
Roughly.
Yes. He wanted me to be a partner on the show with him, a co-host, and I would do design work, and then we were going to build these cars. And he called me to a meeting. He said, bring your portfolio. I want the guys from Discovery Channel to see what you're doing. So I went to this meeting, and they explained to me that the first car is going to be a Ford Mustang that we're going to turn into a lawnmower. Second one is going to be a Ford Explorer that we're going to turn into a trash truck. We're going to cut the roof off. We're going to build an arm that picks up a trash can and dumps everything inside the vehicle. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm trying to build the most beautiful pieces of rolling art that I can build. And you're going to put me on television building these monsters. And my first thought was, I'm going to be known for building these monsters rather than the show cars that I'm enjoying building.
You'll be known but not respected.
Exactly. So I said no to Jesse and Discovery Channel. I said, no, I'm not interested in doing this show.
And at that time, you were at the beginning of a relationship with Boyd Coddington.
No. This is after Boyd's.
So this
is after Boyd's.
Beyond 1998.
Yeah, I worked for Boyd for 8 years. From 90 to 98, I was, and I ended up running his shop for 5 years. But when I left and I started my own business, Jesse and I had worked together at Boyd's. he wanted me to work on this show with him. I said no, and it turns out to be the best no in business I've ever said. Because then Discovery Channel sent another producer to my shop and said, we want to do a show based on your life. And I asked Bud Brutzman, the producer, I said, well, what are we going to do? And he says, I'm going to follow you 24/7, watch you build your next car, and go to the show with you. Well, I was building a 34 Ford 3-window coupe for Ron Whiteside, and we were going to take that to Detroit to compete for the Riddler Award. But I said, that's 11 months out. You don't want to film for 11 months for one show. I said, that's kind of ridiculous. I said, why don't I call Ford Motor Company, see if I can get a dollar car, which is what they hand out dollar cars to certain builders to build show cars to bring to the SEMA show. So I called Jay Mays, told him what we were doing. He says, I want to send you a Thunderbird. So I was supposed to get this Thunderbird in June. I didn't get it until September 12th. I had less than 7 weeks to build the car, but I started building it. And what I would do is I would work for 40 hours straight, and then I'd sleep for 8. Then I'd work for 40 and sleep for 8. Work for 40. I did that for 6 weeks, and I did the last 6 days with no sleep. But I got the car done. The crew in the shop helped me, and we made it to the SEMA show, and Ford presented it with the Best of Show award, and I had lost 27 pounds building that car, just trying to get it done, because I gave my word to Bud that I'll do it. Well, he edited and finished the first episode, and that was Rides, the pilot episode. Discovery Channel loved it, and they said, we want this to be a series. So Bud comes back to me and he says, we got a series, what are we doing next? And I said, I said, that about killed me. But I went ahead and I gave him the names of 25 different hot rod shops, the owners' names and their phone number. I said, call all these guys, find out when they're starting their next build, and in the next 10 months, you can send a film crew once a month to each of these shops, film something, and in 10 months, you got 25 episodes. Well, he ended up filming 60 episodes of Rides. I was in 15 of them. And at the same time, I had told him, I said, I'm interested in doing a series, but not Rides. I said, let's do something similar to Monster Garage, but rather than building a vehicle that performs a task and has no value at the end, let's go to houses or businesses where somebody has a car that they're holding on to. They don't have the money or the means to restore it now or build their dream car now, but let's take that car and build their dream car and give it back to them as a gift. You know, rather than building some monster, let's build something that has value and something that's going to make somebody feel good at the end of the show. Bud, the producer, had the idea of, let's steal the car and prank the owner. He wrote up a treatment, gave it to Discovery Channel. They ordered 7 episodes right off the bat, and it became the most fun thing I've ever done in my life. It was amazing to build these cars and give them back to these owners and make their dream come true.
Was that just because of the reactions of the people at the end of what the car looked like, how it became?
Well, it was a feel-good show, and it was doing something really cool for somebody. That's what I wanted. That's what was missing in my mind in Monster Garage.
And that was called Rides?
No.
That was Overhaulin.
Rides was first, and then Overhaulin
This was
the
Overhaulin.
next show.
She literally Overhaulin.
It took off. We've done over 170 cars on Overhaulin.
170 spanning across those years.
Yeah.
And was there one of those that sticks out as a particular memory?
There's a lot of them that stick out. But
and not for them being your favourite, because you mentioned earlier that that first car, right at the beginning, where you put the 40 hours, then 8 hours sleep into.
Yeah, and that was Rides, not Overhaulin.
But the process took it all out of you. You were knackered at the end of it. Doing that many cars for Overhaulin on a
because
season,
it was an extreme build.
What was the one you remember for being a really tough challenge? Something that like really pushed you to your edge?
Well, I try to do my best in every one. But when you ask me what sticks out, it's not the car. It's the people that we built for. You know, I never thought of Overhaulin as a car show. It was a people show that the cars were the catalyst to tell their stories. And what I loved about the show is we got to make somebody's automotive dream come true. And when you do that for somebody and they're not expecting it, you know, we would prank these owners, and they would think that they're coming to a warehouse. They're going to walk in and they're going to find their car that was stolen, and they had seen pictures of it, basically stripped, and it was abandoned in a field, but we're pretending that we're the police. We've picked up your car and we've got it in this warehouse. We need you to come identify it. And they walk in and it's a beautiful show car. That was what was amazing to me, is seeing them react to, this is my car, and that was the emotional roller coaster that we went on, gave you all the drive to do it again and again and again and again.
But with all these things, with a career so busy, basically, with doing different TV series, trying to take the time to think about how you're going to do a different car, working with different people, from Boyd to setting up your own business to doing 190, you say?
Over 170 cars.
Over 170 cars on Overhaulin. Everything that we've seen as an audience and your fans outside have seen is seen through one camera lens, and usually that's edited to show all the best bits in someone's life, and it gets people that, so if there's someone at home wanting to feel inspired and wanting to get somewhere and push, maybe they're at art college pushing in automotive design or a certain field, I think sometimes the only negative to TV is we tend to show people a lot of the good parts all the time and everything becomes. But behind the scenes, you're running a business, you're running TV shows. There must have been some really tough challenges to overcome.
There was a lot of tough challenges. I was still running my shop while we were building the Overhaulin cars. I didn't want the two to blend together. So Overhaulin was always in a different place because I couldn't, shorten. I didn't want to upset my customers by feeling like I was shorting them by not giving my 100%. So I kept my shop 100% focused on customers' cars. I spent my time on Overhaulin and coming back and forth.
And to get to Overhaulin, you mentioned you were running Boyd's shop for around 5 years.
Yeah, way before Overhaulin.
Why did that end up coming to an end?
Well, when I graduated from Art Center, my senior project was a Chrysler sponsor project where they asked us to create a niche market vehicle. And at Art Center, if you were drawing hot rods or muscle cars, it was frowned upon. They would tell you, we only want you focused on the future of automotive design, not the past. Well, when they asked us to create a niche market vehicle, the example they gave us was somebody that likes to work out on an exercise bike might charge a battery. You can put that battery in your car and get to and from work that day. I knew that that was something that I would probably never do in my lifetime, but it's the project. So I did a series of drawings based on that information. Simple, lightweight vehicles, niche market. But I also took a second direction, and I didn't tell my teachers or any of the other students about it. At my home, I did a second presentation, all muscle cars and hot rods. And I took one drawing, and I did a side view of a 70 Cuda and a plan view of a 33 Plymouth. And I did a car that was this modern hot rod. And I put the two presentations up, and Tom Gale, who was the president of design for Chrysler, is who I was presenting to. And when Tom got to my wall, he says, okay, I know what you're doing here. This is our project, but what are you doing here? And that's all the muscle cars and hot rods. And I said, well, over here is our project that you gave us. I said, you asked us to create a niche market vehicle. And just like every other drawing in this room, we've created niche market vehicles, but we're also trying to create a customer. I said, over here, it's our same project where they're all niche market vehicles, but I'm catering to customers that exist. There are thousands of people out there with their older generation hot rods or muscle car bodies trying to put modern technology into them so they can enjoy them on a daily basis. We can build a hot rod today that has all modern technology and somebody can enjoy it. And Tom Gale loved it, but didn't tell me that he loved it at first. He says, well, what do you want to do for us? And I said, I'd love to do one of these, but I know you're going to ask me to do one of these. He says, no, I want you to do your hot rod. And that became the Plymouth Prowler. When Boyd Coddington saw my model, because Gray Baskerville shot it for Hot Rod Magazine, and I had it at the SEMA show on display. When Boyd saw it, he asked me to start doing some work for him. Well, my education was paid for by a design firm that I worked for in Santa Barbara. And after school, I went back to Santa Barbara. But Boyd asked me to start doing work for him. So I had a full-time job. I started working for Boyd on the side. And Boyd asked me if I knew an engineer that he could have do some work. So I introduced him to one of the engineers that worked in our design firm. The engineer did some work for Boyd. Boyd was unhappy with it. Tom wanted to get paid. Boyd didn't want to pay him. And I just saw this argument going on. And I thought, I don't want to get there with Boyd. I'm loving what I'm doing for him. So for 2.5 years, I worked with Boyd, and I never gave him a bill. He would ask me, what do I owe you? And I said, if I need a set of wheels, I'll ask you if you're open to trade. I'd love to do that. So I got several sets of wheels while I worked for him for 2.5 years. And during that time, I was working on projects at this design firm. My boss came to me one day after 2.5 years, and he says, hey, he says, when you're done with this project you're working on, I don't have anything for you. Do you think you could bring Boyd's work? He knew I did Boyd's work after hours. He says, do you think you can do Boyd's work during shop time and we can bill him for it? And I said, well, the problem with that is I don't bill Boyd for it. This is just my hobby and my passion. He says, okay. He says, is there anything you can do for about 6 months while we wait for it? There was a big project coming into the shop. And I said, let me find out. So I called Ford Motor Company because I was offered a job. Actually, 14 companies offered me jobs when I graduated, but I had given my word that I would go back to Osha Corporation, was the name of the company. They paid for my education. So I had gone back, but I also stayed in touch with several of these people. And one of them was Andy Jacobson, who was the head of the Ford truck studio for F-150. And, well, all the trucks. But his son lived in Santa Barbara, and Andy would come up and visit his son, who lived about 2 blocks from where I lived. We had become friends, and when he was in Santa Barbara, we'd get together and have dinner and whatnot. But I called him and said, hey, do you have anything I can do for about 6 months? And he says, I'll bring you into the truck studio. I said, great. So he wrote me a contract, and I was looking at the contract. Then I got a call from Jay Mays, who was the head of the Volkswagen studio, Volkswagen and Audi. And he said, I heard you're going to Ford. And I said, yeah, but it's just an intern. He said, well, I'm going to redesign the Volkswagen Beetle, and I'd love you to be on the design team. I said, cool, send me a contract, and I'll consider this. So I had a contract from Ford, and I had a contract from Volkswagen, and I'm deciding where I'm going to go and what I'm going to do. And I decided I better tell Boyd that I'm either going to Ford or I'm going to Volkswagen, and the work that I was doing for him, maybe we needed to get another designer involved to help him because I'm going to be gone. So I go down there, I visit with him, I tell him what's going on, and he says, well, what are they offering you? And I told him what both offers were, and he says, I'll offer you more. And he made me a better offer than both of them. And I thought, wow, this would be cool, but it's only for 6 months. But I had drawn a complete show car for him, and I knew I could come down there and build the buck, and we could start building the metal for that car. So I accepted the job at Boyd's, and I told my boss that I was going, and he says, okay, get with HR and figure out what you're doing and have a good time there. So I went to HR, and when they paid for my schooling, the agreement was that I would work for 3 years for them to pay off the schooling, even though they were still paying me a salary. I had done 2.5 years. So HR says, you still owe us X amount for your education. And I said, well, you guys are asking me to go find something for 6 months. I'm leaving because you want me to leave and come back. If I'm paying you off, then I'm not coming back. And it turned out that I never had taken any of my vacation time. I had worked there for 6.5 years. They owed me more in vacation time than I owed for the schooling.
And that's how you got out of it.
And I just said, well, look, I'm going to go do this. And if I'm happy in the end, I'll come, I'll come back if you want me to come back. But if I love what I'm doing down there, I'm not coming back. And that's how we left. And I'm still friends this day with my boss that paid for my education, and I'm in debt to him for that for life. But I went back to Boyd's, or I went down to Boyd's and started working for Boyd, and I absolutely loved what I was doing. It was a dream job. I worked 16 to 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and absolutely never felt like I was working a day in my life. And that lasted for 5 years full time down there. Boyd's had gone public, and through some bad business decisions, the company ended up, the wheel company, I was running the hot rod shop, but the wheel company owned the hot rod shop, and the wheel company is the company that went bankrupt due to some bad business decisions. And they came over and took my checkbook out of the hot rod shop and said, if you run out of things for the guys to do, just send them home. And I was devastated when everything did collapse, because it was a dream job that I would be doing to this day had those decisions not been made, which tanked the company.
Did that all lead up to you then starting your own business, Foose Design?
Boyd's went away. I never left. But when I did end up having to do something else, I called a few car companies and tried to get in with them. And it was at a bad time. They said, no, our hiring is in January, and this is March. They said, we can bring you in next January. I'm thinking, well, I got to find something now. And one of the customers at Boyd's asked me if I would finish his car for him. So I took it to my house, and I was working in my garage at home. And then eventually I got a little shop, and then I went to the bigger shop later.
And that's
how it started. Yeah.
And that, because today, what I find fascinating, I spoke to Mike Brewer about this as well, is back in the 90s and even moving into obviously the early 2000s, everything was about TV. If you were going to film something, bring viewers along on a journey, it was all TV. But these days, you've started to now move into the world of YouTube as well, haven't you? You've got a channel with over 250,000 subscribers doing Foose Design, and many of the people that are here are wandering around with Foose Design. I actually saw you for the first time at SEMA, and everything was Foose Design. What's that journey been like with having your own brand and own business and being able to put the design into that?
It was nothing that I ever planned on doing. But when I was at Art Center in 1986, I had a class that we had to design a logo and a signature for ourselves. That's where I came up with the Foose Design logo and my signature. It was a little different than it is today, the signature, but the logo is still 99% the same. I ended up balancing it where it's an F, a 0, or an O, O-S-E. Well, later I just slightly adjusted the center O to be the very center of the logo so I could put it in a wheel cap. So when I see a wheel on the freeway, I can look at the cap and I know if it's my wheel or not, because that O is perfectly centered in the middle of that wheel.
It's like how on a Rolex you know if it's a fake by the ticking movement of the hand, whether it's smooth or whether it's not. You were basically applying the same kind of logic to a car. But it's frustrating today. We do have limited time, but there is one thing that I would love to ask, which is, and I'm gonna talk about this in a strange way. Where I was in the world of paving slabs for so many years, I can't help it now. I wander around life everywhere, look at the floor, and my brain just tells me what's on the floor. I go, like 900 by 600 Raj blend or whatever, sandstone. When you walk through a car show, there's probably 600 cars out there in the field today, whether they be OEM with nothing done from the manufacturer, whether they be people that have personally customized something or tried to bring it on. Does your brain look at a car and within seconds you can see lines and you're already picturing how you would then build that car out? Is that kind of what happens when you wander around?
Being a designer can also be a curse, because you look at everything, and if something on it looks out of proportion or unbalanced somewhere, I immediately want to change that, or I want to take a piece of paper and redraw it, and that's why I call it a curse, because you're never happy with what you're looking at. But there's other times I'll look at something and go, wow, I just love that. And if there's, mostly the older cars, I can accept things that aren't absolutely perfect or balanced or proportioned, because I know when it was done and it was form following function. Today, we can do anything, especially with a computer. So when I look at a new car today and there's something on it that bothers me, I think, why did they do that? And it's a curse, because I'll look at a car that I might want to buy, but something about it's bothering me. And I know if I bought it, I'd want to cut it up and change it. And I don't want to buy a new car and work on it. I want to just use it and enjoy it. My daily driver is a Ford F-150 Limited, and it's bone stock. I haven't done anything to it. I don't plan to do anything to it, but I just use it and enjoy it. But the cars, the modern cars that are done, I look at those and I think, wow, I just want to make that rear wheel opening a little bit larger, and maybe it needs a taller wheel in it, and that top should just be slightly moved.
So you've achieved so much. You're in the SEMA Hall of Fame, and when I did a lot of research coming up to this episode, it always seemed to me that you achieved everything at a very young age. Like the SEMA Hall of Fame, was that 31 years old you made it into that?
SEMA Hall of Fame? I don't remember how old, but 30. I think I was 31 or 33 when I was in the Hot Rod Hall of Fame. Yeah.
So where do you go from here? Where do you go from here? Do you feel like a sense of achievement on everything? Or what's next? Do you still get excited when you wake up in the morning?
You know what bums me out today is that it is so expensive to build these cars that I almost feel guilty charging a customer what it costs to build a car. So before I ever start a car, that customer has to be okay with a number that I give them to build a car.
And what do you reckon that number is on average?
It depends on what we're building. But if I think I can build a car for, let's just say it's going to be $500,000, I'm going to tell them that they're going to spend $1.5 million. And when they're okay spending $1.5 million, and I can build it for $500,000, then I'm going to be happy, because not only have I built a really cool car, I've also built a friendship. If I tell them I can do the car for $250,000 and it ends up being $600,000, they're mad at me at the end of the project, and I don't want that. And I've had that happen to me, and it's very, very frustrating, because I want this to be a good experience. So I'm struggling right now. I've gone through some big changes in my career and my life. Gotten rid of my agent, got rid of my first wife, and I gave her everything. So I'm starting over from scratch. Just signed away everything in December. But I'm starting from, I still have all my cars, all my tools. I don't have a shop anymore. So I'm looking for a place to move things, but I don't know if I want to go big or go small, downsize, maybe just build cars for myself. But it's because of how expensive it's gotten that I'm really kind of thinking I may not want to build cars for a lot of people. I want to focus on maybe one car at a time, but I'll build cars for myself, sell them, but take my focus and focus on product design. That's where I make my money. I've never made money building cars. That's just been what has been the marketing tool for me to be able to design for other companies and do the wheels and other products. So I may focus my future on product design and branding.
Well, it sounds like that's a hell of a reset, and normally I'd have 2 hours plus to talk to guests, but we are sat literally with 5,000 people around us, speakers blooming, and I only had 40-minute chance to speak to you today. But I am also going on my own journey, building a second version of this van.
I've heard that. Congratulations.
So now you've managed to sit in this one. If we get a chance at the SEMA show this year to sit back down, you'll be able to picture any little minute detail that I may have missed to make it exactly
Fantastic.
the same. And maybe you could even point out something on the outside. But for the limited time we had, thank you for discussing with me what you did and how you got to where you have done today. I know we've only glossed over some of the bits on the surface, but it'd be lovely to sit down and have an in-depth chat in the future. Chip, thank you for coming to the UK, and thank you for sitting with me.
Thank you for having me in the back of the van.
Fantastic. Thank you, buddy.